Welcome back. You're listening to the panel discussion, the CFO Agenda, sponsored by Ernst & Young on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. I'm your moderator, Jason Miller. Our guests today are Charlie Cook, the Department of Navy's Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Office of Financial Management and Comptroller, James Watkins, the Department of Army's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Financial Operations, Doug Bennett, the Department of Air Force's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Financial Operations in the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Financial Management and Comptroller, and Joe Quinn, a Senior Manager in the Advisory Services Practice of Ernst & Young. Gentlemen, before break, Joe, you let us off with the idea of line of sight, data. There was someone mentioned during our panel discussion earlier, 51 feeder systems providing data to the main ERP system. What do you do with all this data? Analytics, that's got to play a huge role. We hear that all the time. So, Joe, take us down that path. What are you seeing from your clients, both public and private sector, around using the data?
Yeah, that's been a big part of this audit readiness effort, is to understand the sources of data. As Charlie mentioned, it's really financial transactions coming from out in the business and operations processes in the federal government that need to be captured in the financial system. Us as CFOs and accountants, we're back here kind of just catching all these transactions flying by and trying to get them into the general ledger. And it's that ability that we've developed now that really sets the federal government up to realize the productivity improvements that we've seen in the private sector. The private sector is now about almost twice as productive as it was in the 80s. So over the past 30 years, the private sector can produce almost twice the output with the same level of resources as it did 30 years ago. So that's the opportunity that we're now set up for in the federal government as well, that a lot of our clients are trying to realize. It's tapping into that data to understand what programs cost, what programs deliver, and whether a program is becoming more or less effective over time. With that information, leaders can then direct resource investments to the programs that are the most effective and really help them meet their missions. So as I described at the beginning, with the overall resources diminishing, it becomes more and more important for those of us in the CFO community to help those leaders understand where resources are going and what we're getting for them.
Joe, quick follow-up. One of the things that I hear time and again from people in the financial management world is you can't just give them the data. It's got to be in a dashboard. I think that's the cool thing now, is all the dashboards. And there's other ways to do it. What, are you seeing a trend in terms of how that data is being delivered to, whether it's chairman of the boards and CEOs, or in your guys' cases, deputy secretaries and secretaries?
Right. The dashboard, the information needs to be easily digestible. The amount of information that's presented to senior leaders in the Department of Defense from my time there and seeing is just amazing. There's so many decisions that go through so few people. Without a analysis around the data and being able to present it in a way that's understandable very quickly, it's meaningless. So that's something that we help our clients in the private sector and the public sector do, is understand what are the drivers of information within those business processes that drive the outcomes. Whether it's customer satisfaction or cost or revenue, it's understanding those processes, identifying the things you need to measure, and then measuring them over time in a way that leadership can respond to.
But are you seeing a trend in terms of how that data is being delivered? I mean, is it all dashboards now?
Yeah, there's several different dashboard technologies, that each of the companies has, and that's really been a focus in a lot of the federal agencies. I see some of that technology being used. When I go in to meet with CFOs in their offices, you'll see on their table from the meeting before some of those dashboard presentations. So I know that information is actually being used and delivered in ways that they can manage from.
Let me turn to Doug for a second. Let me start with you. When you guys are delivering that data, what is your end goal? I mean, right now we know that there's that focus on 14 in 2017, but 10 years from now, what do you hope the data is doing for you?
So we're very focused, as Dr. Moore often points out, the first two letters in FIRE are financial improvement. And so we're very focused on improving the financial services and the information that we deliver to the Air Force, and see audit readiness, a clean opinion, as an outcome of that. Where we see this going is basically scrubbing the numbers that we have. And General Spencer, our Vice Chief of Staff, last year announced an Every Dollar Counts campaign, looking at the good ideas from our airmen out in the field as to how we can save money. We had in FM over 500 suggestions submitted that we've looked at. Foundational to that effort is actually having good data that you can get from your accounting system to find out if these ideas are really going to save money. As an example, do we consolidate utility bills? How much time does it take for our folks out in the field to process 600 and 700 utility bills? Well, it takes a lot of time, and it costs us money when we send them to GFEBS. And so we've found business cases at one base to bring down 700 different utility bills down to 18, and that's going to save us money in the long run. So looking at all those items is where we want to see audit readiness go. We also, Joe mentioned metrics, and we brief our Assistant Secretary, Dr. Warren, and Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, Ms. Thomas, on a monthly basis on metrics. And as Jim pointed out and Charlie pointed out, audit readiness is it's not a finance-only effort. And when I look at many of our metrics, things like the timeliness of vouchers being submitted and the completeness of those are coming from other functional areas outside of the FM area. And so those metrics we do track, and we make sure that we get those fixed when they get out of bounds and keep working on that. And so I kind of want to foot stomp what had been mentioned earlier, that this is not just an FM effort. So we look at those metrics, we give them to our Assistant Secretary, we take action, and we track them.
It's very similar to the whole idea of contracting. It's not just a contracting officer's effort. It takes a whole village, if you will, to award a contract. Let me turn to Jim on this as well. You guys, since GFEBS is having success, you are implementing it across a wide range of installations. Are you already starting to see some of those benefits? Do you have any examples maybe that come to mind?
Absolutely. First of all, GFEBS is deployed to 55,000 users at over 200 locations throughout the world. And it is a success because it was deployed within cost, within budget, and on schedule. So GFEBS, the largest ERP deployment in the world to date, SAP deployment, it's been a success. It has within it the capability for cost, to cost out different operations. So we have a cost module in there. And what the Army is trying to do is to go into a more resource-informed decision base or cost-benefit analysis for all of their major decisions. And this tool, this new, we call it an ERP, an Enterprise Resource Planning System, but this new tool gives us the ability to do that cost-benefit analysis with good, accurate, and timely data. When we're talking about data analytics, the tool provides a lot more robustness in order to get the data quickly. In the past, before we had an enterprise system, we had to do data calls. We call on different commands. We send them either telephone or email. We needed certain information, and then we'd aggregate it and pore over it and take the data, build information, and develop knowledge. Well, with the ERP, the data is already being analyzed to some degree. For example, let's take travel. When a soldier or a civilian travels, there's a cost associated with the travel. And if we set the parameters for the normal travel cost would be, let's say, just for example, between $10 and $1,000 or $2,000, and the travel comes back at $5,000 or $6,000, it's exception. The computer can go through hundreds of thousands of travel vouchers in a very short amount of time and pick out all the travel vouchers that were over $2,000, and we can then do the underlying cause, whether it made sense or not, or whether there was some abuse. So there's many, many ways to use the system to get to the point where we can provide accurate information and with the analysis of the information, accurate knowledge to decision makers so they can make resource-informed decisions.
Let me turn to Charlie. You guys also have an ERP system. I think the acronym was NERP.
Navy ERP, yes, Enterprise Resource Planning.
Talk a little bit about that system and how that's helping you kind of do that long view of line of sight.
Yeah, the Navy has a legacy blended environment right now. The Navy ERP has been fielded to the hardware buying commands, Naval Sea Systems Command, Naval Air Systems Command, and so on. That covers about 50% of the amount of money appropriated to the Department of the Navy. The rest of it right now exists in the legacy systems and will probably be so for at least another 10 years. going forward where we are right now. So we will be in a blended environment under the audit as opposed to the Army, who's gone all in on the GFEBS to their credit. That brings some stability to it, quite frankly, where they get there, where they are right now. To maybe steal a World War II example, when General Eisenhower was over there in the European Theater of Operations, before D-Day had occurred, he was already planning what happened after that, the fall of Berlin. And as financial managers in this whole auditability process, we have to think on 2 or 3 different levels. We have our own D-Day occurring here again, at the turn of the year here in the December-January timeframe when we actually go to audit. That will be a very tough, difficult exercise as we get through that. It will be a couple of years after that when our information is deemed clean, usable. I mean, in the minds of many, people distrust the financial statements because we don't have a clean opinion. As Bob Hale indicated, that's really a misnomer. We have a lot of clean data all over the place, but the hard part's controlling it. Where I have come to understand the process of using data where we are, and again, it's been an evolution, I think, for all of us. In my mind, everything that goes on in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, the defense agencies, those things that are personnel transactions or warfighting transactions, you name it, across the whole gamut of things that go on, devolve into an accounting transaction, into a dollar and cent, and that comes rolling towards our financial statements. In my mind, the balance sheet in and of itself contains everything that has gone on for a military department. To me, this is no different than an MRI. Quite frankly, I view the balance sheet or the financial statements as an MRI of the health of our individual agencies that we work for. The challenge to me is we don't know, we haven't gone through medical school yet, quite frankly, to know how to pull that information out. And to me, that's the challenge of dashboards. To me, the opportunity is almost endless at this point. We have not achieved the final state on dashboards. We're using them more and more to get at specific things, but I think as time goes forward, as we up our game in the financial management community, we will learn to read that, because nobody in Department of Defense outside of the comptroller sees everything end up in one place. So the benefit to us is we have potential omniscience. The burden of that is we have to take that and take it back to our leadership who are warfighters. We don't need the Chief of Naval Operations to become a CPA by any stretch of the imagination. That's not his job description. But everything in those financial statements, which have been boiled down to a dollar and cent, can be traced back to an operational activity. And we as comptrollers need to find a way to take that information back to them as they assess risk. I mean, the budget predictions are, it's going to be a pretty bad 10 years coming forward with the Budget Control Act. Our leaders are going to be stressed with making decisions that are just based on risk more and more. We need to help them understand the risk as portrayed in dollars and cents so they can make a determination. More training, less training. More weapon systems, less weapon systems. Frankly, where we are today, the next time there's a major operation, that's when history will write our report card of helping determine that risk, but those decisions are being made today.
It's interesting you went down the path of risk, because I think that's what this all tags back to. You hear that in so many different levels. We are almost out of time, unfortunately. So I'm going to ask each of you kind of go back down the path, start with Doug on the other end of the table. And what's the takeaway from all of this? When people listening, what should they know about what the in your case, the Air Force is doing with financial management?
Sure. I think what people need to know is the Air Force takes financial management, audit readiness very seriously. Our secretary has come out publicly and voiced her commitment to this, as has the Air Force Chief of Staff. Many of our four-star generals leading our MAGCOMs, and in particular, Air Force Material Command has come out. She holds, our General Wolfenbarger out there, holds monthly meetings to check the status of this. We're committed to this, and this is a service that what it sets its mind to, it can do. And so with the commitment, I am very confident that we are going to get there. And so your Air Force is working hard, and we look forward to going to audit.
All right. Joe Quinn from Ernst & Young.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is, as these gentlemen have described, the era of audit readiness really, in my mind, is coming to a close here. The federal government is under audit. The DoD is going under audit in the fall. And now it's looking to how can we get to a situation where we're actually using this improved financial information to help leadership address those challenges that Charlie just described a second ago, and help them decide what are the best programs and projects to invest our resources in.
All right. Jim Watkins from Army.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you for hosting the show today. But from the Army's perspective, audit readiness is a byproduct of something much bigger. What we're talking about here for audit readiness and audit is really the business processes. We want to improve the business processes and ensure the controls that are associated with those processes are in place and operating effectively. So, for example, if you're required to have a requester to go travel and you, as someone different is the approver, that control is followed. The controls are everything in audit. You must have controls in order to ensure that the data and the transactions are being done according to the rules. And it's all about controls. It's about business processes and ensuring those business processes adhere to the procedures that are prescribed by the Army. Because as you mentioned, Jason, it's about risk. And the controls are in place to preclude the risks from occurring, or at least minimize those risks. So we have to have the controls in every process, and then the corresponding actions that are taking follow the Army standard process, and the financial impact of that is manifested in the financial statements.
All right. Charlie Cook from the Navy, you get the last word.
Thank you. I couldn't agree with Jim and Joe and Doug more. The very simple maxim inside the audit process is if you do things right, the audit opinion will follow. And that's what we're all about. We're fixing processes, we're fixing systems. We polled the comptrollers across the Department of Navy recently, and they are all ready to go. They're there. We are past the point of no return, quite frankly. Across DoD, we are. It's there, and clean opinions are inevitable. We're there. We have the forward movement on that. And echoing my sister services here, for the Department of Navy, from the Pentagon down to the deck plates and the foxholes, everyone's engaged in this. They understand it. They understand the value. Obviously, the depth of that understanding grows each day, and that just makes us stronger in the process. And finally, as we talked about on the data, in my mind, contains just riches, and we are going to get at that as we go forward.
Well, on that note, that's all the time we have for today. You've been listening to the panel discussion, the CFO Agenda, sponsored by Ernst & Young on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. If you missed any part of this panel discussion, you can visit federalnewsradio.com/EY.
On behalf of Ernst & Young, thank you for joining us for this informative discussion. You'll be presented with some polling questions as you leave the webinar to help us improve future sessions. We appreciate your feedback. We'll have the archive from this session available shortly, and a link will be sent to you for you to share with your colleagues. Those of you who requested a training certificate for this webinar should receive it in the next 2 weeks. Be sure to register for upcoming webinars from the Capital Exchange. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you.